Konnichiwa. Today we're here together celebrating the World Cafe and the impact it's had in the world. But on a deeper level, we're also celebrating the human spirit and the depth of our wish to make real connections with each other, to learn from one another and grow wiser together. There are many wonderful stories of World Cafe happening around the world that do just that, and I'm very much looking forward to 3 of them later today from our Japanese colleagues. One of the unique qualities of the World Cafe is its ability to combine intimacy and scale. No matter how many people are in your World Cafe, and there can be hundreds, even thousands, the heart of the World Cafe experience is intimate conversations with 3 other people around a small table. This is a pattern that echoes the way we all learn and grow throughout our lives as we move between circles of conversation and learn from and with each other. In the harvest portion of a World Cafe, we're able to see the connections between our intimate conversations and those of others all over the room. We can experience the expanded awareness that happens when someone on the other side of the room who you haven't met is sharing about something that you've been talking about in your own small group conversations. In those moments, we might begin to sense a collective intelligence, sometimes even a real collective wisdom emerging among us. One of my favorite stories about scale is a World Cafe that happened in Tel Aviv a few years ago. The organizers had the very ambitious idea to set up 1,000 tables in the town square in Tel Aviv, Israel, and invite the people of that city to a conversation about the future of their country. They weren't sure that they would need anywhere near all those tables, but on the day, people not only filled all the tables, they kept coming until there were 10 people sitting at each table, which of course stretches the definition of a World Cafe pretty far, since it's really supposed to be 4 people at a table. But there were 10,000 people in that World Cafe, which is the largest one I've ever heard of, although there were a few others I know that had more than 5,000 people each. But sometimes scale is more about depth of impact than numbers. In Chicago, Illinois, a small team of people in the social services sector came up with the idea of hosting parent cafes for families who were in danger of losing their children through the courts. These parent cafes were a way of inviting the wisdom and perspective of parents along with the court and social services to help determine the best outcome for their children. They were so successful that they're now embedded in child welfare services throughout the state. More recently, the people who started the parent cafes have been designing community police cafes for police and young people in neighborhoods where there's been a lot of violence or drugs or problems between the police and the community. One of the policewomen who's part of that program in Chicago was a participant in an online World Cafe that I hosted recently. She was sharing stories about how different it was to actually know the people in the community that she's policing, and how differently the people react to her when she's working in those neighborhoods where she has relationships with others in the community there. So I started working with the World Cafe about 15 years ago. My background was in online communications, and I was initially brought in to help develop the World Cafe website and create a home to support the international community online. What I've always loved about working online is how it makes the connections between us visible in really tangible ways and helps us to learn together more effectively. As I began to learn more about the World Cafe process and host World Cafes for myself, I saw what's possible when you're able to marry intimacy and scale and bring people together for meaningful conversation in even really large groups. Knowing that the possibilities for global connection were even more pronounced when working online, I began to experiment with bringing the World Cafe process into the online environment and learning how to create hospitable space in the digital realm. One of the very first online World Cafes I hosted was called a triple World Cafe because it happened simultaneously in 3 places. The first was face-to-face in Halifax, Nova Scotia in Canada. The second was in a virtual reality world called Second Life, where people engage with 3-dimensional avatars in a user-generated environment. and the third was on Skype. That cafe was very complicated to pull off. We didn't have access to the technology then that we have now, but it was still hugely exciting. We even had people from the Face-to-Face World Cafe in Halifax coming online to join us in the Second Life World Cafe. So it definitely captured people's imagination. In 2011, I co-hosted a series of online world cafes called Conversations for the 21st Century. The first was called Community for the 21st Century, and it focused on the radical way our ideas of community are changing in today's world. There were 350 people gathered together online from more than 10 countries around the world. We talked about how for some people, community was not just about who lived in their neighborhood, but also the larger ecosystems that they and we all are part of in the natural world. For others, the experience of community extended to people they had never met in person, but were intimately connected to online. So it was a great cafe, and really launched this idea of online world cafes. In a later online cafe in that series, I co-hosted one on the Arab Spring, the social reforms movement led by young people in Greece and around the Arabian Peninsula, and it was simultaneous with the Occupy movement that started in Israel and was growing in the US at that time. In that World Cafe, the man who had co-hosted the World Cafe in Tel Aviv with 10,000 people that I mentioned earlier was a participant, along with many other young people from around the world. And in one small group conversation, he was sitting around the virtual table with a young Syrian man who had never in his life spoken to an Israeli. This young Syrian man was so moved by the depth of their connection, their conversation, the fact that they had so much in common and liked each other, even though he had been brought up to believe that all Israelis were evil, that he began to weep at the depth of his revolution of, the humanity of someone that he was brought up to never speak to. And when they shared the story later in the harvest, many of us who were listening also began to weep. In that moment, we were feeling the power of the World Cafe and just simple human-to-human conversation to break through boundaries, not only of time and place, but also boundaries of cultural prejudice and limitation. In this case, a simple conversation between an Israeli and a Syrian was a cultural taboo that would not have been possible for these two men if they were face-to-face. Online world cafes are not meant to replace face-to-face engagement, but they do offer many unique advantages, and one of them is being able to have direct conversation in real time with people of different cultures in their own locations around the world. So technology is really helping us to have these kinds of intimate World Cafe conversations that scale, just like we're doing today by using video technology to connect with Juanita Brown in the United States and connect our face-to-face World Cafe experiences here with other groups gathering face-to-face at the same time all over Japan. So we have two opportunities coming up for you to experience an online World Cafe for yourself if you're interested in exploring this new way of hosting and participating in World Cafe, and we hope you will join us. The first is an Asia World Cafe happening on October 27th. It's sponsored by the IAF in Japan, and we'll have people from all across Asia, Japan, India, Taipei, Korea, Singapore. We'll be talking about using the World Cafe to enhance collaborations and mutual goals among facilitators throughout Asia. And next month on November 18th, there'll be an opportunity to connect with others in the World Cafe community all around the world for a Global Impact Cafe. And this Global Impact Cafe online will be the culmination of impact cafes on the ground like this one happening all over the world this month. We'll be coming together to see what we're learning in these impact cafes and also from our collective 20 years of dialogic practice. And we very much hope you can join us for one or both of these online cafes. So now I'm excited to hear 3 stories about World Cafe impact from our Japanese colleagues. I'm very honored to be here in Japan and part of this historical celebration of World Cafe, and to learn more about the impact we're making together here in Japan. Thank you.